Good morning everybody and welcome to today's golf drills for the garden. Today I'm going to address a question which I get asked quite often on short game lessons, and that is what's the difference between a chip shot and a pitch shot. Now I'm going to go through a few various things, and I don't think the answer is completely conclusive, but I think it's going to help you to get a greater understanding of how you play these shots. So if I was to summarise it, I would say that you would probably consider that a chip shot might be one where the shaft of the club maybe goes up to about parallel to the ground, and a pitch shot is where you start to get more wrist action and the shaft of the club tends to go beyond that point that's parallel to the ground. With all shots, I always want you to turn through to make sure that your follow through is as long as your backswing, whether that's a chip shot or a pitch shot, because that makes sure everything's working together, creating smooth acceleration through the ball. The key thing with both shots though is that it needs to be a natural golf swing, which is always a circle around your spine, because our mission is always, as you know, to clip the ground between the centre of your stance and the left half of your stance towards your left foot, so that we get the ball, then a nice grazing of the ground beyond. So by creating a circle around us, that makes the bottom of the swing that central point. And with both shots, chipping and pitching, people tend to fall into setup mistakes where they try and do something different, and that can cause either in to out or out to in swing paths. In to out, we know, causes you to hit the ground too early, and then you're either fatting or hitting on the up. That can relate to chips or pitch shots. And the same with out to in. If you go too much out to in this way, it causes too steep an angle of attack, which could either hit the top of the ball or dig down into the ground too much, again causing stabby type shots. So it's really important at first we stick to basics, try and keep our body pretty much parallel to the target, ball position pretty central, and we're looking for the circle where the club swings on the inside and very much comes back on the inside on the way through to help us to get that clip of the ground in the left half of our stance. So the differences then between chipping and pitching are quite subtle. So first of all, let's look at the legs. If we set up and we start to make some very small chip shots, here you can start to ask yourself, how much leg action are you feeling? This is one that I still tinker with a little bit, but I think if you keep your legs dead still, it can create tension in your shoulders. But I might just feel on the very smallest chip shots, I might just feel a tiny amount of weight moving down through my feet into the ground as I swing through, just moving down into the left side of my feet. And that's just enough to make my knees rock a tiny bit and just feel that the club's soft and club, arms, shoulders, chest are just working together in a triangle. Now as my chip shot starts to get longer, now I can almost feel my knees working a little bit more so that my club, arms and chest, the triangle can keep turning through together. As I get to the longer chip shots, I can still feel the feet, and now you can see that my left hip is really starting to turn through as well, and that's making sure that my chest, arms and club keep turning through together. Whereas if this was completely static, you can see it would cause a flick of the club head and the wrists overtaking the body. So there's still some element of movement in the lower body, although it's very, very subtle. Whereas now when I start to get up to pitch shots, the one or two changes I might make in the setup position, I might start to widen my stance very slightly, because if you're making a bigger action, you just need a slightly more stable base to keep your balance. And the only other subtle difference in setup is that when you've got a very small action, you might feel that you need your weight slightly more over your left foot in the first place to help you to get that clip of the ground beyond the ball. Whereas with a pitch shot, you could start to feel you're more central, because as you use your legs more, that creates more natural weight transfer down into your left foot to help you to clip the ground beyond the ball. So you can see now, as the pitch shot gets longer, there's more and more use from the ground up to make sure that the legs are unwinding the chest, arms and club on the way through. So there's the slight differences in the leg action, but just really just a gradual increase of the same sort of sensations as the swing gets bigger. So the other question is, what happens to the hands and wrists? Now for most people in chipping, it's a slightly more dead wristed action because you're maintaining the triangle of club arms and chest. But then as you get longer to the longer chip shots, because there's more momentum being built up, sometimes you can almost feel a slight lag of the club head being left behind as you unwind the body through, and that can make you feel like there's a little bit of wrist hinge in there. Mr. Young likes to call it soft hands, but it's those sort of feelings. But as you get better and better, you can experiment with more wrist action though, because you'll tend to find that the more you hinge your wrists, the more the club will then tend to release and slide under the ball, and that could give you potentially higher, softer shots to change ball flight, but that's getting a bit more advanced. Now on the pitch shots, the wrist action becomes more prominent, and it's where more problems can also occur. So with pitching, people find it really hard to control how much wrist action happens between this position and this position. And I see lots of people either go from a dead arm type shot to a wristier, fuller pitch where they're immediately way up here. And there's a huge amount of difference in power generated between this position and this position. So a great thing to practice is trying to turn to a position where you've got the club shaft at about 10:30 on a clock face, not the 9 o'clock, not the 12 o'clock. So you're just starting to feel a degree of wrist hinge, but not a massive amount. And that might be a fantastic action for you to start to produce your 20, 30, 40 yard shots, instead of too much power and then having to decelerate. The other factor to consider is how those wrists hinge when you're doing this. Make sure that you're not getting this bowing action, which will then make you hit into out. It's just like in the full golf swing, we're making sure that as we hinge, it's this motion, because that's going to make sure that as we unwind, the circle is inside to down the line to inside, to make sure we get that clip of the ground in the right place. So there's just some little things for you to experiment with there, considering just the gradual build-up of the use of the legs as you get longer, and the gradual increase of wrist hinge, and really starting to feel in slow motion, controlling how far you hinge back, controlling how much power you generate in those pitch shots. And this again is great work that you can do in the garden, in slow motion, looking in a reflection without hitting balls, to really build up some feeling and understanding, and then start to experiment and see how it helps strike and how it helps you to control distance through the air with length of swing. And if you're really doing well with it, you can even just experiment with how much you hinge your wrists in the backswing and see how that affects ball flight as you strike the ball. So have fun tinkering with it, and I'll see you tomorrow.